Hello.
Hey,
Is it hello?
it is.
It is. All right. So then it means that this is Biweeklycast and this is episode number 32, which is 2 to the power of 5. Right? Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And the host is still here. This is you.
I'm Slava Rudnitsky, and you are?
And I'm Dima Valenko. And I'm excited about today's episode. We are going to discuss a book called We Are Lynch and We Are Bob.
Which is the first book of a cycle of Bobbyverse, which has been quite trendy for the past few years in sci-fi community. But before we do, there is quite a follow-up.
Right, we do have a little bit of follow-up, and I'm not sure if this is a function of me have started taking a bit more notes as I go through that, but let's and the follow-up is related to that largely. But first, I was so prepared for another Bader Meinhof kind of experience when I heard a word discombobulate for the first time twice in the same podcast, and I was so ready to hear it more. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but that still I still love this word, and I'm looking for opportunities to use it in real life.
Is Biweekly considered real life?
Yes. So
well, then you just have.
Yeah, I engineered the way to use this word.
For people who are not familiar with the word.
So it means to be discombobulated means to be confused or disconcerted.
Disconcerted. Like you've explained it much easier. Thank you. Confused was good.
Right. But discombobulated sounds... It sounds like there's something to it, right?
Fair enough.
I think. All right. So on that note, there are three more note-related things I wanted to share. Remember, like last episode when we discussed the Zettelkasten method, there was a concern that it might be too difficult to kind of capture notes for everything that one comes across, which were very fair. And I would report that in the 2 weeks since we recorded that episode, I didn't count how many notes I captured, but there were, I would want to say, like 2 biggish events around note taking. One very interesting to me, a podcast episode for which I listened twice and I captured a whole bunch of notes. Well, whole bunch of notes is like less than 10, but more than 4. And another such event was about the book I'm reading. I also captured a whole bunch of notes around that. And then, despite me having watched quite a number of videos and listened to other episodes of podcasts, the notes for them were few and far in between. So it was not as bad. Well, at least it's not as bad thus far.
And would you qualify those as literature notes?
Oh, most of them were started as fleeting notes, and some of them I converted into literature notes.
All right, that's fair.
And I also have to report that taking notes while on the run is still a bloody nightmare. I don't know how to do that. It's like there are so many stupid things. Like there is Siri, Siri, right? We are all somewhat acquainted with Siri. So you can be, I can be running. I can say, "Hey Siri," and you would expect that you can tell Siri to, "Hey, record a voice memo for me." And you can say that, you can totally say that, but to which Siri would respond, "You need to unlock your iPhone first." Like, what? Like, why in the world do I need to do that? And you can imagine that doing that while on the run is not very easy. And then the notes it takes when I dictate are obnoxious. We already established that. So the best thing I have is I try to start voice memo from my Apple Watch, which sort of works, but then it interrupts podcast or audio book that I was listening, and it's a bit of a nightmare to get it running again. So it's bad all around.
May I suggest a
Yes,
workaround?
yes, please.
I'm not sure it's going to work and whether it's actually better than what you're doing right now. But as far as I remember, then if you send a voice message to yourself or to an empty chat in Telegram, you can then transcribe it.
Right.
There's a transcription. So basically what you could do, you could just send a voice, and the ones that you need, you can transcribe when you're back.
That is a good idea. I can probably make Siri do something like that for me. I'll need... Yeah, that's a good one. I would want to try it. Cool.
Best
Thank
of luck
you.
there.
No, that's a good suggestion. I'll definitely try it. And report in the follow-up to the next episode, maybe.
All right. And the third note.
And one other finding in my note-taking adventure was that there are notes that I wanted to take, but the ones which I would not want to put in Obsidian with the rest of the notes that I have. For example, context of the dental clinic. It is useful to have them because a friend of mine asked me, like, do I know this dental clinic in London? And I said, yes, I know clinic which was not bad when I used them. And they wanted context of that thing, and it was a bit of a... It took a bit of a time to find those. And yep, I thought, I should have a note for that, but that note didn't go into my Obsidian kind of thing to be linked with the rest of the stuff. It's just in Apple Notes now.
Shouldn't it become like a contact on your phone or somewhere?
It's trickier because why I needed a note for that was they have a website, and you can find website or find them on Google Maps, but there was one element to contacting that dental practice, which is like a business chat in Messenger or Facebook or something along those lines, and they do not have it listed on their website. So I wanted to capture that thing as well because it was faster to interact with them through that link, and it kind of doesn't fit into like normal contacts. But you're right, it would probably be a better place to put it, like a regular contact book.
That's what I do with all the car services and the other potentially interesting places. The only thing that my naming is really terrible. Like I put everything I can into the name so it would be searchable after that, and it could be something like car service, Kiev, left bank, tires, and something else.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Somehow I associate contact book with phone numbers, and if I don't put phone number, it doesn't come to.
Well, there's a website and email section there as well, so it works.
You're right.
So, shall we?
Yep, the book. How did you hear about this?
It's a reference from a friend, and quite a good one. I thanked for it like twice already, and I think I will more.
Cool.
The book itself was recommended as an alternative to funny, witty, and a bit silly style of writing, like Terry Pratchett kind of thing, but in science fiction. And it totally paid off. Like, I'm super excited about this. And I think this is the first fiction book that we are discussing.
Yes, this is new for us. This is the first science fiction book that we are discussing.
I'm kind of worried. Like, it's different. Like, you can't really say, like, oh, managers shouldn't do that.
They totally should, because they can, right?
Yeah, but it's fiction. So,
yes, it's great.
Should we start with first impressions or overall description? What would
how do we do that? Do we do first issue spoiler alert to people who have not read the book but might want to?
I think if they're listening to us on the run, they will probably struggle pausing the podcast and switching to the next episode. So, too bad. I'm sorry for spoiling it, but we're going to do it.
Yeah, there are going to be spoilers. And do we provide an overview of the book itself or start with impressions?
Let's start with impressions and then the overview.
So, what I collected from your impressions, I guess you sort of like the book. I like the book as well. It was for me it was a fun listen because I listened to it as an audiobook, and I definitely do not regret time spent I spent with this with this book. It was light, entertaining, and interesting.
And I think it's kind of has something to do with the character. Like the main character is kind of a tech guy who then wakes up in the future after his physical death and becomes kind of an artificial intelligence. They name it replicant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the idea that they can bring so many popular pop art things into the future and make the Star Trek references and all the other stuff naturally makes it relatable to people who read it today or who listen to it today. And the style overall is really nice. So do you think we can jump straight to your question about the scores? Like, how would you score the book?
Yes, we can do that.
So you suggest a scale from 0 to 5, where 0 means please don't ever talk about this book anymore, and 5, that's amazing.
My approach to scaling on 0 to 5 is, if I think I would read this book again, this would be 5. If I would definitely kind of definitely recommend it to other people, but maybe not read again myself, that would be 4. 3 would be I do not regret time with this book. 2 and 1 and 0, I don't know what that would be, because I thought that something like Start With Why by our dear friend Simon Sinek could fall into in that category. But on the other hand, I've learned so much from critiquing and nitpicking on that book that it was from a category that it is so bad so that it's good now. So I don't really know what would be 2, 1, and 0 on that scale.
Well, we do know 3, 4, and 5, which is quite good.
Right.
And what would be a score?
I think it would be, if I'm kind of completely honest with my liking, it would be like between 3 and 4, maybe 3.5, 3.8, something.
In my case, it's a strong 4. I'm not sure I would ever reread it, but it was definitely worth it. And I'm looking forward to the next one. Like, as soon as it's published, I will probably listen to the next one.
Oh, wait, so it's not published yet. I thought they are already out, because why would you call this book Bobbyverse Book 1 if it's just...
There are 4, and I'm looking forward to the 5th.
Sorry, you got me confused. So there are 4 already?
Yes, there are 4 already.
Right. And the second book, you say you're waiting for it to be published?
The next book. Which
so
is the 5th book.
Oh, okay,
I've listened to 4, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now I discombobulated myself. It works.
All right, fair enough. So let's probably now talk about the way you perceived the plot, like because I think it's in the beginning quite a slow burn, like the way they introduce this person, then the emerging AI that learns how to function. It seems that maybe half of the book is the process of like before going to space, and then the other half is the space adventure. At least it felt like this.
Interesting, because my perception was probably the opposite. And first, what I would have to say is that I really like this style of writing there. It is kind of light, entertaining, and it was great to listen, and then the narration was there was great. I also sort of like the start of the book where it kind of takes you from a present day into the future, as opposed to how often this style of book could be we start in the future and then there are some reference to connect what happens then to the present day. It was similar to other book that I recently read, which was also light and sci-fi. It also had a similar beginning. I kind of liked that, and to be honest, like I like that first part where the Robert or Bob Johansson, I think, right? It was his full name. Found himself as a kind of replicant, and how he became aware of his new self and some of the tensions and struggles associated with that. I kind of liked that part of the book, and I felt it was going kind of fast. I felt like the latter part of the book was a bit slow for me.
Oh, all right. I think you should also probably mention that the way they start naming the titles once the replicant replicates and there are more is also quite funny, because what they do, they name a version of Bob that they're talking about, and the solar system or coordinates or wherever it's happening, and the date. So you could probably see that the timeline is pretty much the same, but it is different for different people and different variations of Bob.
Right. It was funny and interesting, because maybe for the listeners who have not read but already are prepared for spoilers, the idea was that Bob was sort of resurrected as a replicant, where he became an sort of hybrid intelligence which was self-aware and can do things in physical world, such that in the end enabled him to create copies of himself and kind of work collectively. That's why they are calling themselves Legion, and those copies of Bob, they've got their own names. And in the beginning I was like perplexed a little bit, but why do they name chapters as like Earth or something, Bob, year such? Okay, like Bob, and it all of the chapters are being told from first person, right? But then it started making sense when there are multiple versions of Bob. It was useful to know which Bob is speaking to you at the moment.
Fair enough. And I've noticed in your notes that you've split it into 3 plots, which is very helpful for me, because I can't really remember where the first book ends and the second one starts. So
really,
at least I know what it was about for you.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting kind of literature, maybe approach that we have. He created 3 versions of Bob, or like multiple versions of Bob, and they've got names, and they can do different things, which were like one Bob flew, like first the original Bob flew out to outer space, and then he found a place where he can replicate himself, and then a version of Bob flew back to Earth. Another one found another planet and started shepherding a little emerging intelligence there, and another one fought their rival bot. And I thought it was just an interesting way to kind of spin around the three plots.
And I think it kind of keeps splitting and splitting and splitting. Moreover, at certain point, the tendency that Bob started in one of the first chapters, where he made a few rules that every next Bob should have a different name. Well, you can imagine that after a few thousand Bobs, the names become really weird.
Challenging. Did they start using IP addresses or something?
Not yet, but there were some deviations.
Interesting.
And right now, like at the moment where I stopped reading, there is an issue of what they name is a shift when people replicated themselves, or Bobs replicated themselves. There was a slight change in character and needs and specifics of the person, and after like the 20th generation of replication, it was just very different. Like these people were not considered Bobs anymore, which is an interesting concept because I would imagine that talking about AI, they would probably just use copy paste and consider that it should be exactly the same personality when you just take all the same content and data and put it on the similar metrics and you just copy the person. But I think that it added a lot of interesting twists because they could get the characters, different needs, different aspirations. And even in this first book, when he got his first cohort of replicants, they were naming what they'd like to do, where they'd like to go, what is up to their liking and what is not.
Right. And I felt a little bit that this whole idea, I found it very interesting just as a concept. You would imagine that with by and large, Bob is a computer program running on a computer, which the cubes, I don't remember if they had name for that, maybe
metrics,
something generic as a matrix. And I thought that was an interesting idea that they would come out different, even if the Bob himself is in charge of the replication process. And I felt a little bit dissatisfied that in the first book it was not explored any further. It was just, it's given as a fact, but the implications of that and maybe reasons for why that would be, I felt like were not explored enough, at least for my liking.
They came back to it only in book 4. So for 3 books, you keep wondering what the hell is going on and how it works. But by book 4, they started giving some hints and tips on what's actually happening. And they tried to introduce another concept there, the concept of soul. Like, would this thing have a soul? And when you, let's say, you make a copy of a program, and then you put it into a different hardware. Right. And which one is the original? The one that was copied from, or the one that will keep living? And if you turn on one faster than the other, like what happens with the soul? Does it split between these two? Or does the other one get something similar? Or do you have to, I don't know, choose which one gets the soul, which one doesn't? And this kind of spirit changes and character changes that they were showing is also connected with the theory. And as I later found out, the author of the book likes anthropology a lot and this theological debate about replication and whether it's... Can you keep the personality and the soul and the spirit after the death? Is an ongoing story. Moreover, later there will be more different AIs introduced and this discussion will go on.
It's interesting. I'm excited this was explored at least a little bit, but I'm a bit disappointed it's in book 4.
I'm sorry about that. Well, on the positive side, it's just a few lone drives somewhere.
Yep, that's right. I thought another interesting idea about related to that was that initially when Bob became self-aware, the technician who brought him online explained that it's not always successful, and sometimes those replicants, when they start becoming self-aware, they go mad for whatever reason. They also did not explore that much, but there was an interesting story when Bob met Australian bot and maybe for our listeners, at the time the Bob launched itself as a drone into outer space, other nations also had similar constructions. There were Brazilians and Australians, and he met an Australian bot which gone mad, from what I could infer from the description. And the idea there was that Australians selected this particular individual because he was an avid sailor and was used to spending lots of time in solitude while kind of sailing around seas which are in abundance around Australia. But nonetheless, this bot got mad while Bob, who was not a sailor and who was a very sociable person from what I could understand, well, more or less sociable person, he could manage all of this, which I thought was also an interesting idea there.
And that's actually a beginning of quite a plot, because they made huge emphasis on VR technology as something that kept Bob sane, because this was the first technology that he set up, and he created some environment, and then later they developed the system of communicating with each other and visiting each other's environments. And in later books, they will be also working on creating the bodies, like something to impersonate. One of the plots where Bob works with a different race, Deltans. In the later books, he will actually live with the Deltans and become one of them, which is quite an interesting thing. And book 4 is basically built around these androids and different experiences. Like, what would a human experience if you had a chance to be like a flying thing, a swimming thing, or something else?
It's interesting. You're getting me intrigued about the series.
Well, I've noticed that you notice is weird. I noticed you spotted some plot holes, or something that could be a plot hole.
Right. Yeah, I think that there were some unexplored ideas. One of this, which we already discussed, around not exploring the differences between those replicants. What I thought was kind of maybe a hole in the plot was the Bob, or whoever that was, the version of the Bob that flew back to Earth, found Earth in a state after like nuclear Armageddon or something along those lines, with some survivors isolated in different places on Earth, but still hostile towards one another, which was another interesting thing. I thought that maybe there is an interesting exploration of evolution of society that could have happened there, but it didn't. And then he wants to move them to different planet or space, to planet or star system, and he starts constructing ships and so on and so forth, and it takes him so long to do that. And it was at the time, I think, when the other Bob, the original Bob, invented faster than light communications and stuff, and they still need to fish around for asteroids to get together materials to build something. I felt like there's a bit of a mismatch. I think they probably could have harnessed stars and used thermonuclear fusion to just create materials that they need. But oh well, I think it's less interesting that way. Or maybe it's too many of leaps forward with faster than light communication and
I guess so. Plus,
stars.
When it comes to such, let's say, worlds, like when they have to design new system with new politics, there should be an economical resource that has to be collected, shared, and then later on in the book there would be some other races that would be competing for the resources. And that's quite an interesting observation, because I think that I know an actual company that right now is developing starships to fly to asteroids and collect minerals from them. So
Sure.
maybe just inspired by Deep Space Industries.
Right. Yeah. It can totally be. But I wouldn't expect more of intelligence that can replicate itself and invent faster than light communication.
Would you like to try out your guesses for the second book?
Should we?
Why not? Like, if we spoiled things for our listeners, why don't I spoil something for you?
Yeah, as I said, I thought that the first part of the book was probably more interesting and engaging for me, because the latter parts were just, oh, that's fun adventure, but I don't feel like I got many or any at all inspiring kind of ideas to think deeper about something. But nonetheless, it wasn't kind of an entertaining part. But I also felt like that the part where different Bobs go through their different journeys and kind of experience different things was a bit longer than I wanted to go a bit faster, and I thought that it's sort of too predictable in a way that the hero comes back to Earth and then some other thing happened, like with space you meet some new people or new races, and then of course there is an adversary who you need to fight for your existence or something like this. So my estimations and my guesses for what I would expect from the second book would be that Bob's once again go to war with a Brazilian, I don't remember his name, Brazilian bot or whatever made of him.
And I would say you get half a point, because they do go to war, not with Brazilians, but there is the war component in books 2 and 3, which is massive. Like, they do spend a lot of time describing the space military approaches.
But not with Brazilians.
Brazilians are part of the fight, but not the main villain.
Okay, interesting. Okay, all right. I'm happy for half of the point on that. So my second guess was that Bob's, or whatever name of the version of the Bob who helps Earth survivors, those colonists are successfully relocated to wherever they are relocated, and then they basically go forward to repeat the same, create the same disaster they created on Earth or something along those lines, and Bobs have to deal with that once again.
I wouldn't say the disaster, but the word used in the text, quarrel, definitely qualifies as a point. Like, there is quite a big bunch of things related to politics and different ways to deceive each other.
All right. And then maybe we already touched a bit on this, or you touched a bit. I had two theories. I thought that there must be some further development of the Deltan or just extraterrestrial kind of component in that, and I thought that maybe there can be two alternatives. One, that Bob manages to progress Deltans faster so that they become partners with Bobs, and alternatively I thought that maybe other Bobs start exploring more star systems and stuff, and then they meet another race which would be superior to humans and to Bobs in some sense of fashion.
The second guess is more right than the first one. The Deltan story is interesting in the anthropological way, because what they basically describe there is what happens with overpopulation and evolution and technology and all these sort of things. And I think that by the end of book 4, there are at least 4 different races. 1, 2, 3, 4, apart from humans and Bobs. So basically, you could say that Bobs also will split into a separate one. There are 6 races. And it's hard to say which one is actually superior or not superior, but there will be definitely more interactions and drama around it.
Interesting.
One of the things that I specifically enjoyed about this book is not, I can't really name it the sense of humor, but it was really light. And I kept smiling while listening, not laughing, but there was like a smirk on my face all the time. And it's really hard to explain why, because if you ask me, I can't remember a good joke there. Like there were no jokes or some specific things to laugh at.
Mm-hmm.
But the mood itself, and even like in the darkest moments of the book, there is always some unreasonable optimism there. And I think that this is something that kind of resonates with me. And this is exactly what I enjoyed about the book. And I think why I digested all 4 of them in the matter of 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's this, I don't know, it's hard to say, the tone of voice that makes you feel alive and optimistic.
I totally agree with that. There is something about the language that's been used, and you're right that there are no jokes there, but there are little puns here and there, references to modern kind of pop culture, because Bob is originally from our days. He watched Star Trek, even though I didn't watch Star Trek. I appreciated some of the references there, and yeah, it created an impression that Bob, by his nature, is a very kind-hearted person, who's optimistic and tries not to project any kind of down mood on anyone around him.
On top of that, I think, I know it's fiction, but I think Bob here as a character is quite a nice impersonalization of Stoicism as a concept, because at many different stages, the way he was approaching decision making reminded me of Stoic principles and seeing what you can influence and choosing what is the most sociably valuable thing to do. And this idea kind of evolves later on in different characters, in different plot lines. But I think that maybe it's just my angle that I was viewing it from. But
you're right, and it just occurred to me when you said that the Bob, you would remember this, that the kind of container, the vessel for the Bob's mind was that matrix or cube matrix. I think it's you said it's called in the book. It also had some things there to manage Bob's. I'm going to butcher the name of this physiological system, endocrine system for humans, which first tuned down his emotions and whatever hormones that are related to human emotions, and it kind of tuned down for him, and then he wanted to tune that up so that then he can grieve for the family and kind of other people he knew who were now lost, because he was like 100 years in the future. I think maybe this is the element. Bob indeed approach everything very rationally, using, I guess, principles of Stoicism, or maybe it's just the principles of Stoicism are that you should probably you'd better approach everything rationally rather than give in to emotions which might take you to places you don't want to go.
I think later in the book they kind of give up on it, and there are much more intuitive and emotional decisions. And when I mentioned Stoicism, I probably meant that in the matter of there is quite a long line when there's not much choice. You just have to learn, adapt, and do what has to be done. When Bob wakes up, he learns how to operate, he flies to space, he gets to the first spot, he fights the Brazilian, and this is where like the first crossroad happens. Like, what do you do from here? Like, what's your next step? And all the decisions that I've seen in the book, they are quite an illustrator for different justice concepts, utilitarianism or virtues. I think it's the virtues. The virtues model, maybe even something more conceptual. But it's funny how you could see that these theories, the ethical philosophy, develops in science fiction, because in most books you can see that it's already established somehow. Like, let's take Star Trek. They have the Federation. There is like the first directive that we don't influence, and it's not really explained why it is so. It's just like the rule of this world that the Starfleet doesn't get engaged into the lives of other species. But here you can see how an actual person like you and me would be evolving in terms of ethics and decision making, especially considering that right now you basically get the immortality. And how would you build relationship with humans who are still mortal? And how many friends and relatives would you lose in the process until you get really, really tough and start giving up the relationships? Or how many friends would you have to lose in the process to get really stale?
It's interesting. Is it something that came up more in like second, third, fourth book? Or do you think it's in the first book as well?
I think that the first book is not that detailed about it, because basically it's just a very distant interaction. But when Bobs get bodies and they get to interact with people more, plus there is another plot line of different Bobs getting into friendly and intimate relationships with a number of people and not people as well, it gets really interesting.
Yeah, I would imagine that gets interesting. Speaking of intelligence, it also just occurred to me that Bob by himself, he was what I already called hybrid intelligence, right? It was the original Bob, or original human intelligence, which was now running on top of that matrix computer, that is. But in the book itself, I think Bob also created a proper artificial intelligence with that system of his, which he used to Guppy, which he used to interface with his hardware. And essentially, I think by the end of the book, it was sort of indistinguishable from being kind of full general artificial intelligence of some sort, because it could crack jokes, it had attitude, and so on and so forth. And it felt like Bob is communicating with it as if it was another being, not just a system like Hey Siri.
You know, they actually keep elaborating more on the intelligence issue later in the books, because they introduce the proper AI, like the artificial intelligence, not the hybrid, the collective intelligence, separate replicants, human who decide to go to the post-mortal state, but not replicate and develop, but just, choose another way of living. And all of them kind of collaborate and interact with each other.
Interesting. I might want to go into later books as well.
Quite a lot of spoilers.
My intention.
Anything else we should mention, or that should be it?
I think we've gone through at least all of my points, and I've got two extra points with stoicism and that Guppy as an additional intelligent being. Was there anything you wanted to bring up, or like what impressed you maybe the most, or what gave you most dissatisfaction when reading the first book?
I didn't get any dissatisfaction in the process. Like, I enjoyed it that much that I felt hooked, and I got the second one, and then I was still hooked, so I got the third one. I listened to it on my way to Aspen, and then the fourth one on my way from Aspen, and it basically worked like that. That I'm excited that the fifth book is about to be published as well sometime in the coming months. I don't think I have any criticism right now, but it's this, stage of falling in love and getting the new vibe that I haven't explored yet. Right now, the only issue that I have that I can't really start listening to anything else. Like I've downloaded about 4 alternative science fiction or fantasy books, and none of them is as good. So I struggle listening to something else, and I just listen for 5-10 minutes, either the narrator or the plot or the style or the text or something else. Like, all right, I guess I'll just go back to podcasts.
Oh, that's interesting. Then I might have a recommendation for you. There is this book called Fascination by John Scalzi, which is surprisingly kind of retelling of earlier classic sci-fi thing, which he kind of adapted to more modern times. And the original author, or at least his family, they gave a blessing to this, so it's kind of all on good terms. And I also felt like this one is kind of light. It's humorous. There are some quirks about literature style, and the narration there is also good. So I felt like immediately connected the Bobbyverse book with this one in terms of kind of style and lightness, sort of. So you may want to check it out. And also it's a bit shorter. I felt like the Bob book is like 10 hours of narration, whereas I think most commonly books are around 7 hours. So it felt a little bit on the longer side. I mean the Bob, the Via Legion Via Bob book. But
the fourth book consists of 2 parts, and it's about 20 hours.
2 parts. So there you go. There is 4th book and kind of obscured 5th book as well, which is 4th book part 2.
Well, I was so addicted that I actually went on Reddit and started looking for different discussions on what's similar to Bobbyverse. And there were some rates, like they were actually upvoting a number of books and comparing them. And then Goodreads was also suggesting something similar in terms of style and tone. And nothing felt like this. So I'm looking forward to Fascination. I'll give it a try.
Yeah, you tell me. I'm a bit worried. I'm looking in Audible at that book now, and it says it's also about kind of series, a book in the series, and somehow it's book 7, even though I don't know. To me, it feels like it has to be the first book. Is how it all started.
Oh, I'll give it some thoughts and research it. Thank you for the reference.
I'll be curious to hear what you think of that book.
Well, we'll do. Even if it's just 5 minutes. We'll see. So I guess good. We could suggest another spoiler about the next episode.
Yes.
And the holidays are coming. That's it. That would be the spoiler. You can interpret it however you like.
You are a master of cliffhangers here.
Not really. But I think people who have listened to our first season in a different language, they know what the holiday season usually brings. But if you are a newbie in our biweekly community, you'll find out in the next one.
Yep. Tune in a couple of weeks to see what's going to be.
Hopefully good weeks.
Good weeks.